Okay, so we'll continue with 108 verses on compassion. We're going to take the next verse. We're going to take a little detour, but I think it'll be okay. So we're on verse 20, and it says, "But the perfect Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have already offered into your hands, into the hands of great compassion, whatever authority they have, and so they remain benefiting others until the end of existence." Okay, so we ordinary beings, we give up our power to what? To attachment, to have somebody like us or something like that. We give up our power. We give up our power when we blame somebody and make ourselves into a victim. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, quote, quote, give up their power by giving it to great compassion. Okay? So they're giving up their ego power to the power of great compassion. We often give our wisdom power to the power of attachment, blame, victim making, and so on. Getting what I'm saying? Yeah? So just think of giving up the power of your ego, putting it into the hands of great compassion. Yeah. So it's quite a beautiful image, I think. And so whatever authority the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have, it's now in the hands of great compassion. And as a result, they remain in the world to benefit others until the end of existence. In other words, until all sentient beings have been liberated from samsara. So that's quite a commitment to do for sentient beings, Most of us, when we get a feeling of really how awful samsara is, we just want our own liberation ASAP. And what the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are doing, they're aiming for their own liberation. They're not giving it up. They're aiming for it, but they're not staying in it. They're going to come back and manifest in many different forms for the benefit of sentient beings. Okay? So they're going to stay in this world with all of its craziness for our benefit. Yeah? We don't even want to give up a nice vacation in order to stay and do something for somebody else, do we? But they're, a vacation in nirvana, but they don't suffer by doing this. And this is the whole reason why they became enlightened, was to be able to do this. So they stay in samsara with so much joy. Yeah? They say that it's like elephants plunging into a pool in the hot summer. They're so happy, so the high bodhisattvas and the Buddhas so happy to be in our world, to be a benefit. Quite something, isn't it? Yeah? We're always looking for an out. Something difficult, give me an out. But they don't do that. They stay there. Yeah? And work for the benefit of beings. And how do we treat the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are working for our benefit? We kind of ignore them. Those are on the good days. I know. All sorts of things. They may give us good advice and we say, "Why are you bossing me around?" Yeah. They may do all, try and get us to do some sort of Dharma activity, and we go, "I don't have time." They suggest a practice for us to do, and we go, "I don't like it." I don't want to do that practice. You think about it. Here are these beings who are just, their whole raison d'etre is to benefit us, and we just kind of, You know? So who does that hurt? It doesn't hurt them, it hurts us, doesn't it? You know? And yet they don't abandon us. They don't walk out. They don't say, I've had enough, you know. You guys, basta finito, enough is enough. I'm going to Nirvana because I can't stand you anymore. You know? But if they did say that, we wouldn't blame them, would we? Because we're really too much the way we act when they're trying to help us. You know, and so if you look at it, why would you blame them? And yet they don't do that. They don't walk out on us. It's completely amazing. You know, we walk out on people all the time, but they don't walk out on us. Okay, so I thought I'd read a few verses from Shantideva's text, A Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, that talks about in conjunction to this, some of the bodhisattva aspirations that they put into practice. You know, so when they're given their authority into the hands of great compassion, how do they act? Okay, so this is from chapter 3 in the book, and it comes actually right before the verses of taking the bodhisattva vows. So it's really showing kind of how the bodhisattvas are dedicated to being of benefit. Okay, so this is the way they think, and it's written in the first person so that we practice thinking like they think. Okay, so we make our own minds stronger. May the virtue I have acquired by doing all this relieve every suffering of sentient beings. May I be the medicine and the physician for the sick. May I be their nurse until their illness never recurs. With showers of food and drink, may I overcome the afflictions of hunger and thirst. May I become food and drink during times of famine. May I be an inexhaustible treasury for the destitute. With various forms of assistance, may I remain in their presence. For the sake of accomplishing the welfare of all sentient beings, I freely give up my body, enjoyments, and all my virtues of the 3 times. Surrendering everything is nirvana, and my mind seeks nirvana. If I must surrender everything, it is better that I give it to sentient beings. For the sake of all beings, I have made this body pleasureless. Let them continually beat it, revile it, and cover it with filth. You might go, oh, I'm going to let anybody treat my precious body that way. But what the bodhisattvas are doing are cultivating a very strong mind that no matter how people treat them, they're hanging in there. Okay? Let them play with my body, let them laugh at it and ridicule it. What does it matter to me? I have given my body to them. So they've given their body over to the welfare of sentient beings. Whatever sentient beings do, let them do. You know, from the side of the bodhisattva, it doesn't matter. Let them have me perform deeds that are conducive to their happiness. Whoever resorts to me, may it never be in vain. For those who have resorted to me and have an angry or unkind thought, may even that always be the cause for their accomplishing every goal. So Bodhisattva says, even if people hate me and despise me and say horrible things to me, just by the fact of their having a connection with me, may it work for their benefit, and may they attain enlightenment. May those who falsely accuse me, who harm me, and who ridicule me, all partake of awakening. Yeah, we think, may all those who falsely harm me, who falsely accuse me, who harm me, and who ridicule me, you know, may they go to hell. Yeah, may everybody despise them, may they get hit by a truck. You know, this is what we think. Bodhisattva says, may they all partake of awakening. Quite amazing, isn't it? Yeah? And to think that we have the ability to change our mind to think like this. May I be a protector for all those who are without protectors, a guide for travelers, and a boat, a bridge, and a ship for those who wish to cross over. May I be a lamp for those who seek light, a bed for those who seek rest, and may I be a servant for all beings who desire a servant. To all sentient beings, may I be a wish-fulfilling gem, a vase of good fortune, an efficacious mantra, a great medication, a wish-fulfilling tree, and a wish-granting cow. Okay, so these are all objects that grant every wish. Just as earth and other elements are useful in various ways to innumerable sentient beings dwelling throughout infinite space, so may I be in various ways a source of life for the sentient beings present throughout space until they are all liberated. So that's how you think when you've given your mind over to great compassion. Quite inspiring, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, first to think that there's beings in the world that actually think like that, and then even more radical, to think that we can become one of them. And that there's a way to do it. It's not just wishing in empty space, but there's a path to follow to do that. Okay, verse 21. As an inferior mind like my own sees it, when someone turns their attention to you, compassion, they urgently think, all the suffering that beings must endure lies over there, so I had better wave them on down here. In other words, with compassion, sentient beings' suffering is there, so I'm going to bring sentient beings here, where they're away from what's suffering them. Okay, I'm going to lead them away from their suffering. If a single pleasure arises in another who lacks compassion, later it turns into a great deal of suffering. If a single suffering arises in you, compassionate ones, it later disperses all suffering. Okay? So if a single pleasure arises in the mind of somebody who lacks compassion, okay, so some ordinary being who lacks compassion has some pleasure, what usually happens from that? Yeah, they start grasping. Yeah, this is mine. You can't have it. Somebody wants part of it. They say no. They may beat the other person up, get angry at them, chase them away. Yeah, or even this person who lacks compassion has some pleasure and gets attached to it. At the end of the day, does that pleasure, that thing that seemed to provoke their pleasure, does it still continue to give them pleasure? No. Okay? So if a single pleasure arises in the mind of a person who lacks great compassion, later it turns into a great deal of suffering, because they're trying to cling on to it, protect it from others, not wanting others to get it, or they get disappointed in it, disillusioned, and they get cynical because the pleasure didn't stay with them. So it's strange, it's kind of almost like useless to have pleasure if at the end your mind makes it into a cause of suffering, isn't it? Yeah, think about it. Yeah. And then just think, how many times in our own life do we chase after some pleasure and it actually becomes a cause of suffering for us? Yeah, can you think of some examples in your life? Yeah? What are some examples? Relationships? Yeah? What else?
Lying on the beach.
Laying on the beach, how does that become a source of suffering?
Oh, sunburn.
Sunburn, okay. What else?
Intoxicants.
Intoxicants, yeah. Yeah. What else? Food. Good one, you first get it.
Attachment this summer. It was awful.
Yeah.
And then finally they closed down, and that was somebody had shut off my bank account. It was tragic.
Yeah. But it's interesting to think in our own life, how many times pleasure has later brought some kind of pain to us. Yeah. That the very thing we were chasing after turns around and inflicts suffering on us. Right? This is the nature of samsara, isn't it? Okay. So if a single pleasure arises in another who lacks compassion, later it turns into a great deal of suffering. If a single suffering arises in you compassionate ones, so if the bodhisattvas have even a single suffering, later it disperses all sufferings. Okay, how does that happen? If a bodhisattva experiences some suffering, how does that lead to dispersing all suffering? Yeah, they practice when they have the suffering, looking at the emptiness of the suffering, looking at the emptiness of the self who's experiencing it, and that understanding of emptiness propels them towards enlightenment. What else do they do when they have suffering? Generate more compassion, and that aids them on the path. What else do they do? Yeah, practice taking and giving. Yeah, taking on the suffering of others, giving them their own happiness. And so that really propels them on the path. Okay, so for a bodhisattva, a single suffering becomes, so much good material for the Dharma practice. Yeah, for ordinary beings, a single pleasure becomes the cause of misery. And all of this simply depends on the mind. It's completely dependent on the mind. It doesn't depend on what the outside pleasure or suffering was. It depends completely on how our mind responds to it. Whether we make it a pleasure into suffering, or whether we make suffering into a cause of happiness. It's completely up to us in our own mind. So this is really something to think about. Yeah? Because when we realize the truth, that that's really true, that, how our own experience is up to how we choose to react to something, what use we choose to make of something, then it becomes totally impossible to blame anybody else or to feel sorry for ourselves. Because we realize that we have the power to do something about it. Yeah. That doesn't mean we're always going to be successful transforming our mind, but it means we do have the ability and we don't have to stay stuck in that rut. Yeah? If our experiences depended totally on the outside object or the outside person, this experience brings inherent happiness, that person brings inherent suffering. If things existed that way, then it's useless to try and do anything, because it all depends on the external object. Yeah? And then I guess what we try and do is just arrange all our ducks in a row to try and be what we like, be with what we like, and not be with what we don't like. But that's not the thing. It's not that it depends on the situation. It depends on how we choose to interpret and react to it, how we choose to use it. Yeah. And so this, I think, is really the beauty of meeting the Dharma, is that we're finally learning how to use these situations in a productive way instead of letting the wave of affliction crash on our head and get swallowed up by it. Yeah. Because that happens sometimes, doesn't it? You know, affliction comes up. Sometimes we don't even realize it's an afflicted mind. We think it's reality. You know, and the affliction comes like this. You know, have you ever been surfing, you know, in the Pacific Ocean? I was a California girl, you know, and you go in the Pacific Ocean, the huge waves, you know, and that's the way affliction is. It's just coming like right on top of you, and you don't know what hit you because you never even thought of it as an afflicted mind. In fact, sometimes you thought of it as a mind that was going to bring you some happiness. Yeah, and then it crashes, and then you feel like, you know, like we're drowning in our affliction. And then eventually we come up for air. Yeah, hopefully. Okay? But, you know, this is the thing, is if we can learn to discern what is an afflicted mental state and what's not an afflicted mental state, then when affliction's starting to come, we can identify it when it's really small. If we can identify it when it's small, there's a much better chance of cutting it off. But if we think affliction, and this is where attachment is really sticky, you know, because attachment, you kind of feel good, you know. But if we see affliction as something that's going to bring us happiness, then we just run into it with open arms and, you know, wind up in a mess, usually. Okay? But if we can see it when it's coming, then we can get out of its way. We can drop it. Yeah. We can say, your affliction. And the thing is, you know, when we become good at identifying what's affliction and what's not, then affliction gets a little shy. Yeah, not always. It still tries to trick us, even when we identify it. Yeah, but the more proficient we get in recognizing it when it's small, then the less it's going to crash on our head. But we usually make a lot of mistakes in the process of figuring this out, don't we? Yeah, and go through a lot of suffering. And so I think that's why it's so important when we go through a situation where there's been suffering, that we really look back on it and say, what was going on in my mind? Yeah, how did I get myself into that situation physically? You know, how did I let myself get in that situation physically? And then after that, how did I let my afflictions just take the ball and run with it? So I think if we do this, this is how we really learn from our experiences. Now, if we have bad experiences and we just shut them out and ignore them, then we never have the benefit of learning from them by applying the Dharma to them. Yeah? Whereas if we take these experiences out and really use the Dharma to understand what was going on in our mind and alternative ways we could have acted so that we didn't get ourselves into the situation, or even if we were in the situation, alternative ways in which we could have thought or felt so that we were able to transform it. If we, you know, begin to take real experiences from our life and apply the Dharma like this, then we get a lot of practice, because it's real life situations that we've experienced. Okay. Are you getting what I mean? You know, you have some kind of, let's see if I can make an example. I have so many examples my whole life, you know? Yeah, you get into a situation with somebody, yeah, that you trust somebody, and then that person doesn't live up to your trust. You know that one? Yeah, very painful. Okay, so then afterwards, and it's great grist for a pity party. You know, somebody betraying our trust. Boy, we can really go on with a pity party on that one. Yeah, but if we look at it and say, you step back, okay, here's the situation, you crashed, there's a lot of suffering, and then you stop and you go, okay, how did it come to be that I trusted that person in the way I did? I gave that person more trust than they could bear. Yeah? The point isn't that they weren't trustworthy. The point is I gave them more trust than they could bear. How did I come to do that? Okay? Usually, for me, there's attachment involved. Yeah? Somebody looks good, it looks nice, I get blind, I think this is going to be the best thing, so I over-trust somebody without really checking out the situation very well because my mind's full of attachment. And then that person, they're just being who they are, but I have this incredible expectation on them that's totally unrealistic. So then it crashes, and I say, you betrayed my trust. That's how I phrase it. Yeah, it's your fault. You betrayed my trust. I'm not taking responsibility that I gave them more trust than they could bear because I was running with my attachment. And I was running with my neediness. So if I look at the situation clearly and I see, oh, I got myself into that situation. Yeah? I mean, no comment on what the other person did. That's not the issue. It's I got myself into that situation. I have to take responsibility for it and not just blame them. Okay? And so I need to be more careful next time when this attachment comes up that blinds me and makes me just give somebody more trust than they could bear. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then, if I'm still feeling pain, yeah, well, why am I feeling pain? They betrayed my trust. What does that really mean? They didn't do what I want. That's what it really means, doesn't it? Yeah, they didn't do what I wanted them to do. Okay? So again, my wrong way of thinking is the source of my feeling so much incredible pain, feeling rejected, feeling abandoned, feeling, really horrible. Yeah? Because my mind was reacting to this situation as if I have every right in the world to make that person do what I want them to do. Yeah? But if I switch the situation and say, they didn't do what I wanted them to do, this is a really good lesson for me. Yeah? Here's my incredible expectations that just got shattered, and I'm feeling pain, and it's all because of my self-centered thought. So this is good. My self-centered thought is getting a licking here. Yeah, because, instead of us feeling the pain, we should give the pain to the self-centered thought, because it's the one that came up with the unrealistic expectation that thinks that everybody should do what I want them to do. Where did that come from? Okay? And then say, oh, it's good. It's good. I'm experiencing some suffering. I'm going to learn from this situation. And now I also understand how other people feel when they say, so-and-so betrayed my trust. understand what their pain is, I can be more compassionate. But I can also drop the whole thing and let go of my own pain. I don't have to stay stuck in it. Okay? So that's just an example of how you take something that happened in the past, bring it into your meditation, and apply all these ways of thinking, yeah, to help you transform something that was that was the cause of grief before into the cause of you progressing on the path. And in that way we really learn from, it's possible to learn from every single thing that happens in our life. Yeah? And if we learn from every single thing that happens in our life by transforming our mind, then we don't carry around any baggage. Yeah? Wouldn't that be nice not to carry around any baggage from the past? Yeah, to put that baggage down and stop carrying it around. You know, it'd be so freeing, so liberating. We'd have so much more energy to do so many more things. You know, and meanwhile now, when we hang on to those things from the past, our energy is consumed by, you know, how we go round and around and ruminate and dig ourselves into a hole. Okay? So, you know, this is really, and this is the purpose of our meditation practice, is to take these kinds of situations and really use them in our practice and practice changing our mind right now. And then everything becomes your practice. And as you change your mind, then everything becomes joyful. Whereas when we pay allegiance to the self-centered mind and the self-grasping ignorance, then no matter what happens, we're miserable. It's true, isn't it? Yeah? Sometimes, it happened recently, there was somebody who has just a wonderful life. I mean, this person has had an incredible, fortunate life here in the States. And they went on a holiday and it didn't turn out the way they wanted, and they were so miserable about it, really down in the dumps. And I just thought, my goodness, you know, may that be the worst suffering they ever experience. Yeah, is being disappointed because a vacation didn't turn out the way you wanted. But for that person, when they were in it, that was so excruciatingly suffering, so much suffering. You know, the way they sounded like when they were telling the story, that it was as if you were listening to somebody from Sudan who's living in a war-torn town and their kids are starving. That's how much anguish that person had. Yeah? And I just really thought, wow, you know, this is what the self-centered mind does. You have a beautiful life, you can't see it, and you get miserable about one small thing. Yeah? Self-centered thought is dangerous.
I just wondered if that person with the vacation, if that person's pain, even though it seems to us ridiculous, but if he felt it.
Oh, that's what I meant, yeah.
I wonder if his pain burned some bad karma for him.
Okay, so does that pain burn some bad karma? That pain is the result of bad karma. Mm-hmm. So that karma finishes because it's ripened. But unless that person changes the way they think, it's not purifying the karma. Purifying the karma is when we get it so that the karma can't ripen in its full result. So when we purify, we might have a small suffering from a karma that could have produced a big suffering. And we do that purification by the way we think when we're having that suffering. So that if with the Dharma mind we recognize that and we say, okay, I'm purifying karma, this is good, and I'm developing compassion, then you purify. But if you don't have that awareness and you're completely in the middle of the situation, feeling miserable and anguish, then it's just the ripening of karma. There's not purification. Okay? But you really see that no matter what our external situation is, our self-centered thought will find a way to make us miserable. Yeah? All the time. Because I've lived abroad a great deal of my adult life in third world countries, and there is so much more mental anguish in this country than in Indian villages stricken by poverty. You know, there they have physical anguish, but they do not have the mental anguish that we have. And when you look at it, why is it that we have so much mental anguish? It's because we have the leisure for the self-centered thought to, you know, it has time to create dramas and soap operas. And it will. Yeah? As soon as we give it any space, it will create a soap opera. Starring us, of course. Yeah? And then, you know, incredible. So, you know, I think it can be very helpful. You know, sometimes the self-centered thought has created a soap opera, and we don't realize it until Act 2. You know, we've already been living through Act 1, and all the people around us have been experiencing us living in Act 1, you know. And we get to Act 2, and, you know, it's like, ding, ding, dong, oh, this is my mind. Yeah. Then as soon as that happens, then just apply the Dharma and change the situation. Yeah? If you go, oh, it's already Act 2 and I haven't realized it so far and I've dumped all my garbage on the people around me, no wonder I'm such an awful person. Yep, that's Act 3. Okay. So I think we have to recognize it when it's there, you know, and really apply the Dharma, you know, right there in our life. And learn to have some sense of humor about our soap operas. Yeah? I think it's very important that we learn to laugh at ourselves. Okay. Well, that I really got off on a tangent, didn't I? Okay, but I was trying to give you some examples of exactly how to use this in your meditation so that it's directly applicable to your life. Yeah, because that's the whole meaning of the Dharma. It's to transform our mind. Yeah, Dharma practice isn't about sitting there, you know, holding your mala, doing gazillion mantras. It's about actually transforming your mind. Yeah? So sometimes we can get lost in the superficial things and think Dharma is, you know, having, you know, one of those nice malas with the, you know, the classy things and a nice mala bag and, you know, and then your beautiful Buddha statue and, you know, and a special shawl to wear when you're meditating, some brocade altar cloth, and, you know, and then a hat, you know, Tibetans like hats. Now I have a hat. Where's my Sravasti Abbey cap? You know, but we can get so off in left field, mistaking things that aren't Dharma for Dharma. Yeah? So it always comes back to transforming our mind, changing our mind. Okay? Yeah? And, we've been doing some building here this year at the Abbey. And growing the Abbey, it's not about the buildings. The building is just the place where we can put our body. Yeah. Growing the Abbey means all of us are practicing. Okay. So it's not about the building. It's about our own internal practice. Nice to have the buildings. Thank you, everybody. But, the buildings are useless if we don't practice. Yeah, there's no purpose to have them if there's no practice going on. Okay. Verse 23. If there is something that by adopting it becomes the cause for the eradication of many sufferings, then whatever brand of suffering one might experience, is it not you who eliminates that suffering? Okay, so if there is something that by adopting it becomes the cause for the eradication of many sufferings, okay, so if we adopt compassion, that becomes the cause for the eradication of many sufferings. Right? Then, whatever brand of suffering one might experience, physical, mental, spiritual, whatever, is it not you, great compassion, who eliminates that suffering? Okay. So what it's saying is that whatever we experience, if we bring great compassion into the situation, it eliminates that suffering. Okay? So you might say, but how does, if I'm suffering from cancer or kidney disease, how is great compassion going to eliminate that suffering? It doesn't necessarily eliminate it by making the illness go away. Okay? But it eliminates the suffering by transforming the mind that's in that body. Okay? So that experience of having the illness can be transformed so that the mind experiences joy. And the joy that you experience isn't like, the joy from having ice cream. It's the joy of having transformed the mind and feeling that even if you're suffering, your life is worthwhile and you're able to make it meaningful for sentient beings. So even if you're in a state of physical suffering, if you can transform that by practicing great compassion, then mentally you have a sense of purpose and meaning, and that brings you comfort and joy. Okay? So, for example, somebody who has a very severe physical illness may practice the taking and giving meditation and just put their mind really on taking on the suffering of others, giving them their happiness, taking on the suffering, giving the happiness. And if you do that enough, your mind really gets transformed, and you feel like, wow, it's very meaningful to have this illness because my practice is really going ahead. Yeah? I had the experience one time in, a long time ago actually, when I had an infection in my big toe. I was living in France. The nuns lived in the horse stables. And I had an infection in my big toe. It was nighttime. You can't imagine that it's possible to feel so much pain in your big toe. I mean, how often every day do we think of our big toe? I don't know about you, but I ignore my big toe, And then this one day, it was like incredible pain. the nunnery was out in the countryside, couldn't go to the doctor that night. I had to wait until the next morning. And I just lay in the meditation hall. I was in so much pain. And then I just started thinking of the Bodhisattva's qualities. Yeah, and I just sat there and, put my mind and thought about the Bodhisattva's qualities, because we had been studying in some of the philosophical texts. They talk about different qualities of the Bodhisattvas, different kinds of compassion, all this stuff. So I just started thinking about that, and oh yeah, it's possible to do this. It's possible to think like this. It's possible to have those qualities, and just by the force of thinking like that, even though I didn't have those qualities, but by the force of thinking that there's people who have them and having faith in those people and that it's possible to generate those, I somehow made it through the night until I went to the doctor the next morning, and then he lacerated my toe and drained it. Okay? But it was a real example for me of, you just gotta change the mind, Yeah, and if you do, then your whole experience changes. And I heard the story of one Lama, Rilpa Rinpoche, and he had cancer and was terribly ill with cancer, was dying of cancer, and was going in and out of a coma. And at one point, so I imagine there was quite a bit of pain he was experiencing. And at one point, he came out of the coma, and he said to his assistant, he said, "There's Buddhas in this room. Quick, we've got to make offerings to them." Yeah? So that's the sign of a mind that has practiced throughout one's life. Yeah? That in spite of the pain, the mind sees Buddhas and responds by wanting to make offerings. Quite remarkable, isn't it? Okay? So it's just saying that if we adopt this perspective of great compassion, then it can transform any kind of situation that we happen to be going through. Moreover, in order to prevent the onslaught of the harm that could strike beings, you, O protector, bring suffering upon yourself, as did the Bodhisattva Supushpachandra. Okay, so this is some example from the Samadhi Raja Sutra. I don't know the story. It's something about Supushpachandra went to an eventually certain death at the hands of a king, so that he could for a few days preach the Dharma in a kingdom. So in other words, he somehow gave up his life in order to have the opportunity to teach the Dharma for a few days in that kingdom. Okay? So that's why it says, moreover, in order to prevent the onslaught of the harm that could strike beings, you, O protector, bring suffering upon yourself. So in order to protect those other living beings from their own afflictions, he took the opportunity to teach them the Dharma, even though it brought suffering upon himself, because he was killed by the king. Yeah, but from the perspective of this bodhisattva, he was very happy to do that. So it's important that we understand this properly, that bodhisattva is not masochistic. He's not saying, I'm worthless, I deserve to suffer, therefore I'm going to teach these sentient beings and let the king kill me because I'm worthless. Okay? Bodhisattvas do not act from the viewpoint of weakness and of feeling worthless, but instead saying, this is something worthwhile for other sentient beings. If it causes me some discomfort, that's okay. I'm willing to go through that because it's going to benefit them. Okay? So we may not be willing to give up our whole life to teach the Dharma for a few days in a kingdom. We may not be capable of that kind of compassion right now, but there is things that we can do. There are things that we can do in our own life where if we think properly, we're willing to bear a little bit of hardship on ourselves because it becomes something so beneficial for somebody else. Okay? And to bear that hardship without reminding the other person that we're doing it. Okay? But really doing it because we see that it's something worthwhile to do, and so taking delight in it. Okay? Okay, so as to protect the lives of many, and so that those with a lot of negativity will not fall into hell, you would even physically harm another, as did the compassionate merchant trader. Okay, so this is referring to a story that is often told of a bodhisattva who was a merchant trader, who was a captain of a ship, and he saw with, I guess, clairvoyant powers that one of the other merchants who was a passenger on the ship was going to kill, because there were 500 of them, was going to kill the other 499 and run off with the wealth. Okay? So the captain, seeing that this one person was going to kill 499 people and rob of the wealth, he chose to kill that person. Okay? Now, this is an action of killing. Yeah, if you have the precept to kill, it's a transgression of the killing, of that precept. So you might wonder, wait a minute, what's going on? Well, the thing is that by the force of that merchant, of the captain's compassion, they said, even if I have to suffer in a lower rebirth, due to having killed this person, I've not only saved the 499 people, but I've also saved the would-be murderer. So the captain had compassion not only for the would-be victims, but also for the would-be murderer. He wasn't playing favorites. Okay, he wasn't killing that one merchant out of anger and hatred and, you despicable being kind of attitude, but in order to protect him from creating a very heavy negative karma, which would cause him a lot of suffering. Okay? And so that bodhisattva was willing himself to bear the result of the action of killing in order to protect that person and the victims. Okay? So, this is a story that's very often told. It's important that we understand it correctly, because our mind sometimes, in some kind of situation, thinks that we're capable of doing the same thing the captain did. Yeah? So-and-so is creating discord in the office, so if I get them fired, I'm doing it with great compassion to save them from creating the negative karma and saving the office from being in discord. And we say this with our mouth, but inside here, we want to retaliate. Okay? We got to be really careful, because we have to, in order to do this kind of action, you have to have compassion for the would-be victim and the would-be perpetrator, both of them equally, and you also have to be 100% willing to accept the suffering result of doing a negative action upon yourself. Okay? Mm-hmm.
So being a bodhisattva is not a permanent condition?
The bodhisattva, so you're asking if being a bodhisattva isn't a permanent condition. In the case of this one captain who killed, there was a brief moment of suffering, but by the power of his compassion, that suffering vanished very quickly. But the reason it vanished so quickly was because he was willing to bear that suffering. Okay? Whereas if we kind of rationalize our harmful intention by saying it's out of compassion, and we think we're able to bear the suffering, but actually we freak out, yeah, then we've missed the point. Okay? So we have to be quite careful with this kind of thing. Okay. Individuals expert in the ways of compassion, though they may, for the sake of others, enter into the Avicii hell, will have their bodies and minds refreshed by happiness and bliss, like a swan in a sea of lotuses. Okay? So, individuals expert in the way of compassion, so people having this great compassion really imbued in their hearts, though they may, for the sake of others, enter into the Avicii hell. Avicii hell is the lowest, most horrible hell realm. Okay? So this kind of bodhisattva, for the benefit of the beings in this horrible, most painful hell realm, voluntarily goes there to benefit them. Okay? Quite something, isn't it? I mean, we don't even want to go to the hell realm as a result of our own negative karma, let alone just to help somebody else. Yeah? Do you ever get mad at people because they create their own suffering? Yeah? Now, oh, you're in hell because you just didn't get your life together, you know? I told you what you should have done. You didn't do it. Now look where you're born. Okay? And we sometimes, we can get mad at people who we feel create their own suffering and then who want us to rescue them. We get very mad at them. Okay? So I think we don't need to get mad at them. We can identify that they were under the influence of their own afflictions, and due to that they got themselves in that situation. So we can have compassion for them, because it's sad, isn't it? You know, here's this being whose mind is overwhelmed by afflictions that created the cause for them to have so much suffering. So to have that kind of sense of sadness and compassion, but without getting mad at them because they did it. Yeah? Do you ever get mad at people because they're suffering? Yeah? Yeah? So we can do that. So instead of doing that, really, have some compassion. Sometimes when we feel that other people want us to rescue them and we don't want to do it, then we get angry as a way of protecting ourselves from feeling like we have to do it. Know what I mean? Yeah? Somebody got themselves into a big jam. They call me to help. It's like, I don't want to be bothered, because they got themselves into this jam, especially after I told them not to do it. And then they come to me for help, and I'm mad, because it's really inconvenient. Okay? So to shield myself from all of that, I just get mad and blame them. So that's not really appropriate. Yeah? It doesn't mean we have to go rescue them, because rescuing other people doesn't always benefit them. Sometimes it can just reinforce the bad behavior. But we don't have to get mad at them in order to detach ourselves from the situation. Yeah. Okay. Although they may, for the sake of others, enter into the Avicii hell, they will have their bodies and minds refreshed by happiness and bliss, like a swan in a sea of lotuses. So for that bodhisattva to go to Avicii hell, they feel so happy. Also physically, their bodies and minds are refreshed by happiness and bliss. You can understand how their minds are refreshed. How is their body refreshed? I don't know. Okay? But they feel, because for them, the whole focus of their life is compassion and being of benefit to others. So when that's the focus of their life, even they have to go to some place that's tremendously suffering, they feel joyful in doing so. I once saw a film about Mother Teresa and her life, and it showed a clip of her going to Beirut when there were all these bombings going on in Beirut, and she was going to try and, I forget what she was doing, if she was trying to get some people out of there or trying to get some medical supplies in, but there she was in the middle of Beirut talking with some kind of government official. Yeah, and you could hear the bombs in the background while they're filming this. And I thought, wow, that's courageous. Yeah, to me the idea of being in a place where they're bombing is like so scary because you can't even see what's coming at you. Yeah, and you don't know where it's coming from or who's doing it or where it's going to end or where you can go. And Mother Teresa just voluntarily went into that situation to be a benefit. You know, if I was there, I would like be panicked and terrified. And she was just calmly talking to this government official. Okay? So that kind of thing, you know, you can go into dangerous situations or situations of great suffering and harm, but your mind isn't freaked out about it. Are there some situations that scare you? There's some that scare me, you know? And think of going in there to benefit somebody else. Yikes. Okay. We have a few minutes for questions. Yeah.
I'm wondering if there are situations that you can kind of purposely put yourself in, you know, almost like ascetic-wise, so that you can really get a flavor for suffering. And it seems to me like, at least in our modern world, that there's so much opportunity to not suffer. And oh, you're hurt. Oh, here's a pill. Here's a shot. Here's, you know, whatever. And it just occurred to me as you were talking that really the best thing that can happen to all of us is to get hurt pretty good and injured pretty good once in a while.
Okay.
And, you know, do people voluntarily do this, I suppose, is my question, or is that just stupid to do that?
Okay, so you're saying that in our modern world we're kind of pampered and we have a lot of ways to reduce our suffering. So could it possibly be good for us to deliberately cause ourselves to be injured or hurt in some way so that we get used to suffering? I don't think so. Okay? There are certain ascetic practices that the Buddha taught, you know, that kind of push people a little bit, like eating just once a day, or wearing robes made of complete rags, or sleeping while you're sitting up. Of course, some people do that kind of automatically. And it's not suffering at all. Okay. Yeah, so there are those kind of practices where you kind of nudge yourself and, you know, make it harder on your body. But in general, suffering comes to us. We don't need to go look for it. Yeah? It comes all the time to us. You don't have to do much. It's going to come. Okay? So the thing is, I mean, this is kind of our controlling mind. I'll create a situation of suffering so that I can handle it. I'll schedule in suffering Tuesday from 10 to 11, knowing that it's going to be predictable. I'm going to know what I'm going to do, do and da-da-da-da-da. But, I think it's a much greater challenge to not control things and have to deal with the suffering that comes when we don't have it scheduled. Yeah? You know what I mean? That because sometimes one of the hardest things about dealing with the suffering is that really, it's a pain in the neck because we wanted to do something else. Yeah. I don't want to have to tend to my health and to this and this and this because I was going to do this and that and that. And and here all of a sudden we have to change gears and deal with a situation that we didn't want. And that in and of itself creates a lot of suffering, plus whatever suffering there was in the situation. So I think sometimes learning how to switch gears without suffering is part of the real thing to learn.
That part about refreshing the body, great compassion, that actually strikes home to me very easily because if you're doing those same activities without great compassion, then you end up feeling overwhelmed and then your body breaks down and the body definitely can't withstand those kind of heroic activities if your mind is stressing out over it, like, oh God, I gotta do this, I gotta go to BT Hall and all that.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying that the physical suffering makes sense, or the alleviation of the physical suffering for the bodhisattva who's going to the deepest hell makes sense because if they didn't have great compassion, it would adversely affect their body, and their body would break down, and there would be a lot of great suffering. Whereas when we have compassion, it also improves our own health and our own physical well-being.
And it's like when you hear about like heroic, like people doing superhuman things and stuff, great love, their child, a car is falling on them or something like that, their body is able to surpass what they would normally do. Whereas without that compassion, they're not capable of doing that.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, but the body can do things that normally we can't do when we're energized by great compassion. Yeah.
I guess my question was the purpose of the verse, like about the merchant trader, because it seems like there's so many, for me anyway, but when I think of the masses of where that would really apply, it would come into the mind of delusion, that, like you were saying, and so why, because none of us, I can't say that, I can't imagine being in that situation or of that place. It seems like there's a lot of room for misdirection.
So you're asking why even tell that story of the merchant, of the captain killing that one merchant, because it kind of sets up for us the image that where our delusion actually comes in and rationalizes a bunch of things and then harms somebody else, but we use that story to rationalize our bad action.
Like it should only be in the PhD curriculum.
Like what?
The verse should only be in the PhD curriculum.
Oh, okay. So the verse is really applying to just the high bodhisattva. So why they tell this story, I think, is for a few reasons. One is to let us know that sometime in the future, when we actually have that kind of compassion and that purity of mind, that we can act in that way. And it can also keep us from judging when we see somebody else do something and we don't exactly know, is that person a bodhisattva? Are they an ordinary being? Okay, so it gives us a little bit of mental space, maybe not to be so full of condemnation of somebody's action. Yeah?
Well, in modern terms,
if you were a sea captain on a ship that was hijacked, which has happened recently, and they were holding you captive, and you had the opportunity to kill one of the, in other words, save the ship by killing someone, the captain would probably do that. I'm not saying that captain's supposed to stop that. He might go to hell, but there are some circumstances.
Yeah. Okay, so you're saying that in the recent case of where somebody was actually hijacked and held by pirates, that a captain could possibly think, to kill the hijackers and save the ship. We see that kind of thing happening a lot. That action, whether it's done by compassion or done by hatred, there's a big difference, okay? So somebody, if there were really an enlightened captain who did that out of compassion for everybody, also for the hijackers, then it would be the kind of heroic deed. But if somebody is doing it out of hatred and anger, it's just plain old hatred and anger. Even if they save the rest of the people, still they're going to be creating some negative karma in there. Because they're not thinking, oh, I have compassion for the pirates. They're thinking, oh, these did it, Okay? And so it's the power of the motivation that makes something virtuous or non-virtuous.
Seems to me that when I hear that story, kind of just when I hear it, the emphasis seems to be on that the Bodhisattva was recognizing the result that would come to the perpetrator, not that he was saving 500 people. And also entailed in that is that he was willing to have that same harm come upon himself by going to the hell realms, by killing. So it's kind of, the emphasis doesn't seem to be on the killing act. The emphasis is on the act of taking compassion to someone who is causing harm. The emphasis in the story isn't on he saved 499 people. Hurrah, let's give him a purple star, The emphasis was on the fact that he was willing to experience suffering himself and that he had compassion for the other person. Because those are the things that are so different, that would make that situation very different than what in ordinary ways we would say is a heroic action.
Does that story go on? Because the other 499 passengers, all they see is the captain killing this one. So he might have consequences to pay, right?
Right. He might have.